Albert, how are you?
I'm good. How you guys doing?
We are great.
Doing awesome.
What did you glean from your conversation with Caleb Williams that stood out to you?
I mean, how ready he is to be a franchise quarterback. It feels like in every single way, he's so comfortable in where he is and how he got here. And, I think, like for a lot of you guys coming out of college, it can be overwhelming, not the football part, but everything that comes along with being in that position, and so there's expectations, there's, there's scrutiny, there's all of it. And you guys know that, different guys deal with it different ways. This is a guy, it sort of reminds me a little bit of, Trevor Lawrence, I would say, like where Trevor Lawrence had been under the spotlight and had been the number one guy for so long that like nothing really fazed him, right? Like coming in, and when he really wound up needing it his first couple of years in the league, right? Like dealing with everything that happened the Urban Meyer year, and then seeing the first coaching staff that he played for getting fired. Like I don't know that very many quarterbacks would have survived what Trevor Lawrence survived and come out the other side the same player the way that he did. And I think a lot of that was because he was so comfortable in his own skin. He was so comfortable under the spotlight because he'd been under the spotlight for such a long time. And I think there's something similar about Caleb. They're different people, but I think the same dynamic exists where it's just a guy who has, been preparing to be a franchise quarterback for a long, long time, and now that he is, a franchise quarterback for an NFL team, he's ready. He's not overwhelmed by what's right in front of him. And, I think that's even kind of, that even, comes out and like how he answered the question I wanted to ask him when I went into my conversation with him, which was like, why is it that it seems like there are all these narratives out, about you and you don't have any problem. You don't have any, you don't fight against them. And, his whole, the way he handled it, I think is, that he's so comfortable in who he is. And it's a result, again, of think of the path they supposed to get here.
So you mentioned in talking with him and you referenced Trevor Lawrence. And I went back again yesterday. There's a book called Quarterback Dads that my friend Teddy Greenstein wrote. And I have the book. I go back and there's an entire chapter on this kid who's on an all-star team and he doesn't get named the starter because the coach decides he's going to start his own son. And the dad says to the son, okay, tell me what you want out of your life. He said, I want to be the number one pick in the NFL draft. I want to be a franchise quarterback. He said, okay, from this very moment, if that's what you want, that's how you're going to live your life. We don't eat a lot of junk food. We work out before school, and we are going to train from this moment on so that nothing will faze you. That kid was a young teenager named Caleb Williams. So much like Trevor Lawrence, nothing, even in this insane town of Chicago, should faze him. A town, by the way, that since 2010 has had 20 different starting quarterbacks. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think it is. And, it's interesting because I did ask about the involvement of his dad, and, I think I've told you guys this story, but if not, I'll tell it again, where they went in and the Bears asked about his dad, right, when they met with Cliff Kingsbury. And this was the quote-unquote offensive coordinator interview. I think Cliff was well aware of what a big part of the purpose of that interview was, which was for the Bears to get information on Caleb Williams from him. And Cliff told the Bears, we only saw Caleb's dad once in the practice facility. And Cliff said, he's like, I loved Caleb's dad, but Caleb's dad was not involved in football whatsoever. And Cliff is, obviously being a college coach for as long as he was, and then, the Cardinals, he had seen overbearing quarterback dads, and he didn't view Carl that way. He viewed Carl as a guy who was really going to be involved in helping his son with the business part of it, but then was going to stay out of the way with the football part. And I think it's sort of similar to in this way, and I know I'm giving you guys a lot of analogies here, the Bosas.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've gotten to know John Bosa pretty well, and obviously, he did something right to have two sons, drafted higher than he was, and he was a first round pick, right? And what John Bosa told me was, he was like, I never coached my kid, and he said I didn't want to coach my kids. He said what I wanted to do was, when I figured out that that was their dream, I wanted to give them the resources in every way possible to go and pursue that, because I had the means to do it. So I wanted to give them the best nutritionist. I wanted to give them the best trainer. I wanted them to go to the best high school. I wanted them to have the best of everything if they wanted to pursue it, so they have the best chance of achieving the dream. And, in certain ways, I think that's sort of what Carl Williams has tried to do for Caleb, is getting him around the best people. And have they had some different outside the box ideas? They have. That's definitely true. And he has some ideas when it comes to the business of football. But that happened with the Bosas too. Joey Bosa, at a time when no rookies were holding out of camp, when it came to, the slotted contracts, Joey Bosa held out until the end of August in 2016 and still wound up winning the Rookie of the Year, So I don't think the things we're seeing with Caleb are necessarily unprecedented. I do think that they're a little misunderstood. And I do think there's precedent of people like Caleb. I brought up the Lawrence story, bringing up the Bosas. There's a path there that I think he's walking that we've seen successful people go down in the past.
Albert Breer from SI.com and Monday Morning Quarterback with us on Kap and J Hood on ESPN 1000. Check out SI.com for the Caleb Williams story about his rookie potential. You talked to Shane Waldron, the offensive coordinator as well, the Gino Smith whisperer. What is it that Waldron did with Gino that could relate to Caleb?
He built an offense for him, and, obviously they were doing things a little differently when Russell was there. And Shane was there for, I think it was a year. I have to look this up again, but I think it was a year with Russell as the starter. Mm-hmm. And then, they had to kind of have Gino ready to go that first year. And then, after that, it was okay, how do we build an offense that, works for, that works the way that works for Gino Smith and based on his background and where he's coming from. And so, I think that's what, good offensive coaches do, is they fit their scheme to the talent. And, I know that there's a lot of that he's done for Caleb already. So, where Gino had played and had success playing in the spread in college. And then you look at some of the systems that he played in as a pro and kind of some of the things that he did well out of the gun, and where, he's able to kind of see the field in front of him. He was able to kind of leverage Gino's best strengths and get a level of performance out of Gino that you hadn't seen yet in the NFL. And I think those sorts of principles definitely apply with Caleb. And I think that's one of the reasons why it's so important that they got out in front of his development and installing with him in March and April, and having a baseline. When it came to the cadence and formations and motions and all that different stuff when he showed up, it allowed them to build off of that foundation. And so if you have the foundation in place where he knows the terminology and he knows what you're doing and he's learning how to call a play in the huddle, well, then you can start to shape the offense to who he is as a player. And, so I think the way that the Bears have creatively been able to use the time over this calendar year, and ramping Caleb up even before he was drafted, getting him ready to go. And then, allowing, and then taking the time that saved and using it to make an offense that works, to create an offense that works for Caleb specifically, and do some of the things that Shane did for Gino in Seattle, I think sets him up to have a really nice rookie year.
We're talking to Albert Breer from SI.com. Great stuff on Caleb Williams. I want to talk to you about Matthew Judon. So, Albert, your reporting, which you were all over this Matthew Judon story, it came down, it looks like, to the Bears and the Falcons. And the Bears said, we'll give you the third-round pick. And then the report that you filed said Judon had his choice and he picked Atlanta. Why?
I don't know exactly why. He is from the South, so that could be a factor. I don't think the Patriots necessarily know why he picked the Falcons. I just think given those two choices, I do know he's been focused on, trying to get another contract. And, I don't know if there was some assurance from the Falcons, or maybe he felt like, given where he is right now, and the fact that Montez Sweat is in Chicago, he'd have a better shot to be the guy and set up another payday if he were in Atlanta. Atlanta obviously has a bigger need at the position. I know the Bears do have a need at the position, but the Falcons really don't have edge rushers right now. So it could have been one of a variety of things. All I know definitively is that he was given the choice, and given the choice, he took the opportunity to go to the Falcons.
Albert, we heard the soundbite from Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback for Miami, on the Dan Libertard show at Stugatz. And he really called out Brian Flores for Flores' time with Miami. I'm wondering from your standpoint, what does that do for Brian Flores as far as him getting another head coaching job when Tua, with a brand new bag contract-wise, is so candid about his time with Flores?
Well, I think it makes whatever Flores says about this publicly kind of critical, like in how he handles it, because there's going to be a lot of eyes on him. And I think Flo's a really good coach, and I think he proved it last year again in Minnesota. I do think like he's learned and grown from his experiences there in Miami, and he made mistakes. There's no question about it. I would say things were very sideways there, and there are a lot of things that can be said. And obviously Tua said some of them, and Tua has every right to say that because he's played a lot better under Mike McDaniel than he did under Brian Flores. I think it's probably best for Brian Flores to fall on the sword here and say, I made a lot of mistakes. I've learned from the mistakes. This is an opportunity for him to show and put on display that, he's learned and grown from his time in Miami. And so, I think he's speaking. I think he's scheduled to speak today. Isn't that right, guys?
I believe so.
I believe he is, yes.
I think that's right? Like, so I think it's just one of those things where these press conferences usually don't mean much, right? We all have attended a million of them, and there's a million of them every day in the NFL. Very few of them matter. This one matters, because this is Brian Flores, again, being questioned for what happened in Miami. And this is his first opportunity to be like one of the forward-facing characters in the story. And, when you own an NFL team, like that's a big part of what you're doing with your head coach. That guy becomes the face of your team. And so, this is an opportunity, as I see it anyway, for Brian Flores to kind of manage his own professional crisis right in front of the public and show that he'd be able to do that for somebody else if given the chance. I've given a second chance to be a head coach in the NFL.
The Green Bay Packers got pounded the other day, Albert. And I know Jordan Love didn't play, but Matt LaFleur came out and said, guys, I'm more than a little concerned because we were terrible the day or two before in joint practices. I would have thought after we got humbled like that with our first team offense and defense, we would come out and play with more edge, and we did not. He said, we are not where we need to be. Is there a real concern in Green Bay?
I don't think so. I mean, I don't know. I feel like when I was there a few weeks ago, there was real optimism on where they are. And, I think sometimes coaches can use these situations as devices to try and get the team going and try to heighten the sense of urgency during camp. I think everybody knows like what it's like, like in the second and third and fourth week of camp, especially for veteran players who might not be playing in the games, it's kind of like, let's get to the season here already. And so I think it's a way to give his team a little bit of a spark, but that's a talented group, guys. Like Jordan, by all accounts, has had a really nice training camp. He's got a young group of receivers he's coming up with. I think the defense is going to be better under Jeff Hafley. They've got a lot going for them there. And my interpretation of this from Matt LaFleur is this is sort of a warning shot to the team, like in saying like, hey, I know we're in a good spot, but it's not automatic. We can't just push a button and win, 11, 12 games.
It's good to know that you're going to be wearing your fireproof boots as you cover Giants camp. Daniel Jones is terrible. Okay, what's going on with the Giants are terrible. Okay, so you'll have your one-on-one with Mike Francesa, which is going to be great. We look forward to reading that, Albert. So that's going to be great.
Yeah. It's, I mean, I you know what's funny about like what's funny about this is like, I feel like all these like, and you guys know what I'm talking about, all the social media accounts that like make like sweeping judgments off of like single training camp plays.
Yeah.
I feel like that's like happened more with Giants camp than any other camp in the league. So I'm going to be interested to dig into the truth. Like, it's like, Malik Neighbors makes a nice catch downfield. The Giants have their wide receiver one. No one in the NFL calls it wide receiver one, by the way.
Right.
But the Giants have their wide receiver one. And like, then Daniel Jones throws a pick. Season over in East Rutherford. It's just, yeah. But I know all they're trying to do is get us mad, right? Like, so
right.
Maybe they succeeded.
Hey, Albert, as we let you go, one word answer: Fields or Wilson, who starts day one?
Wilson, but I'd say by week 5 it's Fields. I think it's not. This is a big week there, guys. This is a big week. Like, this is the first time in a while that Wilson's been able to go. Wilson's going to be able to go out there and practice without restriction. And he's been highly inconsistent to this point in camp. Fields has practiced better. If Russell can't turn a corner, I think a real discussion is had. And I don't think the door is closed at all on Fields being the week 1 starter.
As always, Albert, we appreciate it. Thanks so much for coming on the show.